A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for watching KBC Channel 1. This is BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum. Over the next hour, we will be discussing the impact of the weather changes, specifically the economic impact. Remember, yesterday, the Kenya Meteorological Department released the outlook for the March, April, May 2026 long rains, and our very own Jael Opicho was on the ground and she filed the following report.
With the country coming out of the October, November, December season that has been marked with severe drought in parts of the country like Lamu, Mandera and Turkana owing to failed rains, the weatherman says the situation is not about to let up during the March, April, May long rain season. According to the Met Department, some regions will receive fair to good distribution and others will experience poor distribution. This, the weatherman says, will impact negatively on food security, especially in the counties expected to receive average to depressed rainfall such as Machakos, Kitui, Makueni, Kajiado, Taita Taveta, Mombasa, Kilifi, Lamu and Kwale.
Rainfall is likely to be below average during the forecast period. Despite the depressed rainfall over the coast, occasional heavy rainfall events are likely to occur in a few areas.
We are also going to be promoting climate smart agriculture practices, mainly technologies such as conservation agriculture, water harvest, efficient irrigation system.
And on the flip side, the Met Department warns of expected heavy rains in other parts of the country that could result in flooding, landslides, waterborne and vector-borne diseases, urging players in the health, water and energy sectors to put in place necessary measures to avert any crisis.
On health system preparedness, that is on stockpiling of vaccines, wash and nutrition commodities, vector control commodities and isolation centers.
With enhanced rainfall, where we expect flooding, we are saying that there'll be need to repair the dikes in the flood-prone areas.
To optimize hydropower dispatch and to absorb the extra inflows into the dams.
The weatherman has also singled out 20 counties that are expected to receive above normal rainfall, urging them to prepare for the planting season. Kenya Met Department Acting Director Edward Muriuki says in the MAM season, Lake Victoria Basin, the highlands west and east of the Rift Valley, which include Nairobi and parts of the northwestern region, will receive near to above average rainfall.
Occasional heavy rainfall events are likely to occur in several parts of the stated region.
Near to below average rainfall is expected over the southeastern lowlands and the northeastern. Meanwhile, warmer than average temperatures are expected over the whole country, with increased probabilities over parts of Lake Victoria Basin, coast, southeastern lowlands and parts of northeastern Kenya.
The rains is expected to occur in the month of April over most regions, except for the coast, where the peak is expected to be in May.
That there is a report by Jael Opicho Chemtai, which was filed after the release of the March, April, May 2026 long rains outlook by the Kenya Meteorological Department. Now, on the bottom left of your screen there is my colleague Lucy Mwaura, who is on the sign language interpretation. And in studio, we'd like to continue this conversation on the changing weather patterns and what the impact of that is on the economy specifically. And with me in studio is Dr. Richard Muita, who is the Deputy Director in charge of Climate Services at the Kenya Meteorological Department. We also have Judith Akolo, who is my colleague at KBC. She is a climate journalist. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Dr. Muita, I'd like you to comment on that particular outlook that was released yesterday and just give us a context, so to say.
Well, thank you, Betty. The seasonal rainfall forecast, or outlook as you call it, was released yesterday, and it clearly highlighted the expectation of the rainfall patterns or the weather in general with regard to our country. And as you saw, the director said that much of the western part of the country, up to the northwestern parts, including the Lake Victoria Basin, all the way to the southern regions, including Narok and parts of the South Rift, we expect near average to above average rainfall. That is, you get close to what that region normally gets when the season is good, and slightly above that. For the eastern parts of the country, much of the eastern part of the country, we expect near average to below average rainfall. That also includes parts of the coastal region.
Right. And so this is coming at a time when we are currently going through a drought situation. The report that was released in December, if I'm not wrong, showed that 24 arid and semi-arid counties are at different stages of impact of drought. And there are situations that are dire. There's Turkana, there's Mandera, and other regions that are in a dire situation. So, Judith Akolo, you have handled these reports over time. Please make that make sense for us.
What is going to happen in this particular season, according to the Met Service, is that the areas that are in rainfall deficit are again going to receive below normal rainfall, meaning that they'll not be able to recover from the effects of the drought. But when you look at Turkana County and then you look at Samburu County, it's in the area that is expected to receive near to above normal rainfall, meaning that they could recover from the effects of the drought right now. But counties like Marsabit, Mandera, Wajir, those are the areas that really we need to really focus on and see how to help the vulnerable communities to be able to cushion them from the impacts of the drought. But when you look at the areas that are expected to receive near to above average rainfall, we should be able to produce enough in those particular areas. And these areas, I'm talking about counties like Trans Nzoia, counties like Nyandarua. You know, these are the grain basket areas of our country. If we decide to really invest in productivity in these particular counties, then we'll be able to offset some of the impacts in the areas that are expected to receive below average rainfall. The biggest worry is in the coastal region, and I think Dr. Mwita can expound on that.
Right, let's just throw it to you. Yeah, that biggest.
Yeah, basically for the coastal region, normally the onset, that's the start of this particular expected season, will come a little bit late. However, historically the coast experiences its peak in the month of May. And so considering that the month of May is again towards the end of the rainfall season, then it means for the coast the situation might not be as rosy or as good. And therefore, in terms of the socio-economic activities that depend on rainfall, then the coastal region perhaps will have to either come up with other interventions in terms of how to bridge that gap. Yeah. And
most, as Akolo mentioned, production, agricultural production in this country, a lot of it is rain-fed. And so I would like Daktari to explain to us what kind of challenges we are facing right now, considering the climate change that the world is facing, and we are part of the regions globally that are highly impacted. Explain to us what this means for farmers, for food production.
Yeah, I guess as Judith had said or highlighted earlier, we expect good rains, let me call them good rains, in the maize basket or in the agricultural potential areas. And she already mentioned some of these areas like Itale. Even areas in central Kenya are also expected to receive near average to above average. And therefore, it's the expectation that those areas, if they maximize and take advantage of the season, they can maximize production and therefore ensure food security in general, hoping that other factors which are not weather related will not interfere with that expectation. However, for areas that expect near average to below average, which I mentioned, most of them actually lie in the eastern border of Kenya. Those are pastoral areas. We all know that the large bulk of our livestock are actually found in the eastern, semi-arid and arid pastoral areas or rangelands. So we expect that because pasture will definitely regenerate after the rains start. However, because the rains will not be sufficient and the distribution actually is expected to be poor, generally, in terms of the overall season, then it means that they might not be able to come out of the drought situation which has already hit the region. And therefore, in terms of the agricultural productivity, we expect a positive impact on the part of those agricultural potential regions we mentioned. However, for these other pastoral areas and semi-arid areas, even where they support crop production, still we don't expect them to really have much to look after or to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's delve more into the livestock situation, because I think a week ago we made a report about there's a region that is selling goat, which would have easily gone for 15,000 at 500 shillings, because they just need it, to go before it dies. And Akolo, you have covered these things year in, year out. What has been your experience?
My experience has been that we are lagging behind as a country in dealing with the impacts that are arising from climate change. For instance, right now we should be thinking about how do we adapt to the climate that has already changed. And we can adapt to this by ensuring that we invest in our research. For instance, we have livestock that is hardy, that can survive some of these impacts that we are having. But there's a disconnect, We don't fund research, and therefore we end up in this particular situation where we lose animals. But again, even as we look at the research, what we could do is, in some of the areas that are going to receive below average rainfall, we have transboundary river resources. And an example is a county like Mandera. This county is on the border with Ethiopia and as well as Somalia, but I'm looking at the Ethiopian side. Now, according to the Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum that released its forecast last week, Ethiopia is among the countries that is going to receive above average rainfall, and more so in the Ethiopian highlands, meaning that the rivers that have their catchment in the Ethiopian highlands and flow into Kenya will have sufficient water. So what we should be looking at is how are the people in charge of the water sector going to ensure that this water does not go to waste, does not just flow into the country and down into the Indian Ocean, that it will actually be utilized in watering these particular areas so that we are able to at least have enough feed for the livestock. But again, I'm an optimist, and I'm looking at it this way. Mm-hmm. Even as the season is as dire as it is, if we listened carefully to the director of the Kenya Meteorological Service, Edward Murioki, he said clearly that even as it's going to be below average rainfall in some areas, there could be episodic heavy rainfall instances. And then we go back to the issue of adaptation. How are we utilizing this episodic rainfall that comes within the season, where we have actually been, where the forecast indicates that there's going to be below normal rainfall, but you get this heavy rainfall. And I think Dr. Mwita can explain to us, we have those seasonalities within the season that we get certain weather systems that then provide us with a lot of moisture, a lot of rainfall. How are we utilizing that?
Right.
So if we put that into use, then we'll be able to at least alleviate some of the really big challenges that we may have in these particular areas.
Mm-hmm. You bring up very important pointers, because one of the biggest challenges, as I had said, was the dependence on rain by our farmers, and not taking advantage of the water that we get,
Yes.
from all sources, whether it's the rain or underground water. And so, from your end, Dr. Muita, I would like to know, first of all, in terms of information getting to the farmers about these forecasts, and them actually using them in their, planning their seasons, their planting seasons, and then you can also comment on the issue of water conservation.
Yeah, basically, as a department, we normally have our services closer to the people. Principally, we have our directors of meteorological services in each of the 47 counties. And right now, after we have released the seasonal forecast for this season, they have already on a top gear to come up with what we call participatory scenario planning forums, where they engaged the local stakeholders, key stakeholders who will actually benefit from the forecast, and especially to come up with proper scenarios or advisories which would favor each region according to how the rain is expected to evolve in their region. And therefore, what that means is that if an area is more of expected to receive some, as Judith puts it, episodic, we talk about some storms. Storms, these are heavy rainfall that may occur even within a day or two, and then it can lead to substantial amount of water, which, if well utilized, possibly conserved or preserved, then it can be used probably for other things. But most importantly, for those areas that are expected to receive near average and below average, you find that for those storms to be useful, probably from the livestock or agriculture sector, they can look at a situation where they can store or harvest the extra, the excess pasture, because we know even the growth rate of grass. Like now, it has been in drought situation, but the seeds are still in the soil. In fact, within 2-3 days of rain, you start seeing, the grass sprouting out. And therefore, there could be a situation where, because of those storms, they may have some pasture which may sprout and increase in surplus. And if they can be able to harvest that, so that probably they can conserve that for that period when the rain comes to an end, and of course, overall expecting less rain in the season, then it may help them to slightly enable or sustain their livestock. However, for those areas that were in drought but are expecting above average rainfall, like Samburu and Turkana counties, I guess for them they may have an advantage, where probably much of this water, if there were some interventions in place, because the reactive situation that we normally find ourselves is the one that makes things not work. But if, say, they had some either water pans, some dams, or they had boosted their catchment areas, then that can really be very useful for them, because the soil moisture can continue giving them some of the outputs they need for them to continue. Yeah.
And what can be done to get out of this reactive situation? Because this happens every year. We have this conversation every year, What needs to be done to ensure that the conversations we are having are about how much water do we have in storage? What will the rains do for us to support what we already have? Yeah, Judith?
Thank you for that question. I think the problem we are having is we are yet to internalize that indeed climate change is with us. And this I say because when you look at how our national budget is put in place, our MPs are yet to internalize that. Because if they did, then we would not be having members of parliament from, say, the ASAL areas calling a press conference to lament about the impacts of the drought in their region. Perhaps they could be looking at how do we then ensure that there is a budget allocation that will cushion these particular counties from the impacts. And this I say because when you look at how do we ensure that there is availability of water that can reach, you know, close to the people. Instead of seeing mothers walking all the way 8 kilometers in search of water, how can we pipe this water to a central place where they can actually collect the water from? So, and that one needs budgetary allocation. Also, if we build the resilience of Kenyans to know that what they can do, you know, adaptation is local. Adaptation is local. It can either be within the household, within the region, within the community. So you look at, if this is what really impacts us, how can we ensure that we are resilient to be able to deal with the impacts when they arise? An example would be this. If, for example, in the eastern part of the country, they didn't, the rainfall season actually failed, and this season is not their season. But you see, if they had planted early maturing crops or crops that are drought tolerant, they would not have gone at a loss. But then when you look at how much maybe a household used to plant whatever crop they planted, expecting sufficient rainfall, and in the end they lose everything. So if there was a budgetary allocation to help cushion this household to be able to again plant the following season, then you'll be building that particular resilience for that household. But where they lose everything because the weather pattern was not in favor of what they grew, and then they end up losing everything, it means that they have to start from a very low position to be able again to recover from that kind of shock. So my answer would be that we need to start looking at how do we build the resilience of these communities that are facing severe impacts of climate change.
Practical examples are required, you know, and I know that insurance in the agriculture sector is still very much low, both from uptake by the farmers and even the products that are available for them. But before we delve into that a little bit more, I will throw the same question to Dr. Muita in terms of ensuring that we are proactive in our cause to ensure that we are conserving water.
Yeah, in my opinion is that both at the national and county level, we already have the right policies, because most of these regulations and policies have been well researched. And therefore, what is required is just to implement them to the letter. And having said this, because of what Judith mentioned about adaptation, in order for us to have resilience, we need to move out of this reactive situation by ensuring that we have both short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans, and then have deliberate kind of monitoring and following up to the letter. For the short term, they may include immediate kind of interventions, where, for example, the moment we expect the rains, are we able to facilitate the farmers get, say, quality seeds on time and other farm inputs, for instance? For those farmers who have lost their livestock, for instance, what is our short-term intervention within our policies? Then we ensure we have taken care of that. After that, we upgrade that now to the medium term, where we say now, in order for us to be a little bit sustainable, maybe we need to ensure that these families don't go hungry. Maybe these families don't keep livestock that is not sustainable. They can destock during the time when they have more, and then use that money to do what we call diversification. Because when you depend on only one kind of reliance in terms of what you depend on, then when it fails, then you can even come from a very good situation to a very low situation. And therefore, there is need for diversification such that those areas that perhaps, say, grow drought-tolerant crops, they can look at the ones that will give them better yields. For instance, there's this tradition in Kenya where people believe that you must plant or grow maize. And no matter what you tell these people historically, they don't know, I must see some maize in my... But the research that we have carried out and that has been carried out in the country, we find that a farmer may get more yields if they planted, say, a certain variety of maize, which does not require a lot of rainfall, or millet. I remember during a project that was christened the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, we went to some parts of Kericho which normally are cold and they cannot sustain maize crop. But through what Carlo had researched on, a specific farmer planted a certain variety of sorghum, and wow, even the rains were not good, the temperatures never improved, but they just were smiling to the bank. And so this is the kind of thing that we should encourage across the whole country, depending on the suitability. We need to look at the suitability of each place. If we find that, say, livestock production is no longer so viable in a certain area, we should not insist on it. Otherwise, we'll always lose our livestock, lose our crops, and then eventually we say Serikali's idea.
Indeed. I like that you've mentioned the issue of reaching the farmers and telling them this information. As Judith said, this adaptation and resilience is local. So you talked about the meteorological services directors in the counties, right? Yeah. Now, you talked about that they do the forums, the public participation forums for the stakeholders that are involved. Let's talk about ensuring that these farmers at their farm level are actually receiving the information they need to make wiser choices as they plan their planting and even choose their seeds. Because as we know, extension services are a problem in this country. Very few farmers can access extension services. The ones that are available are private and expensive. So ensuring that these farmers can receive information, it could be through technology, you know, and any other information platforms. I would like your comment on that before I go to Akolo.
Yeah, basically there are many channels of disseminating and communicating, you know, this information. And from the KMD perspective, we also leverage on our media sector to support. And therefore we have the mainstream media and we also have the localized, you know, media. Like now you have vernacular radio stations and so on. At the same time, we have social platforms. Like Kenya Met Department has a Twitter account. It's on Facebook. It's on Instagram, and we also have a website. But at the county level, we also leverage on local meetings, or you know, commonly known as barazas, and also through the national government. When they have those meetings under the county commissioners, the departments are represented. And since the departments are devolved, therefore they work closely with the locals. So much of this information, the first recipients of this information are those, I'll call them like their agents. And therefore after that they are able to disburse this. For example, yesterday after the outlook, the seasonal outlook was released, even before we left the venue, already all the media houses had already been informed. And as you continued with your bulletins, you are announcing to Kenyans. So when you now go to the lower level, you find that there are some CSOs, there are NGOs that work also with, and they are very interested. So I would say finally that with the research that we have done is that today as we speak, something like 80 to 85% of our information would reach most of the people on the ground. And in some areas, it could even be close to 100%, maybe 95%, depending on the way they have grouped themselves. Because there are certain groups of users of weather and climate information who have formed themselves into groups. They use a WhatsApp group. Even you have WhatsApp groups that have 1,000 people and so on. So once they receive that information in that WhatsApp group, they would also individually also disseminate amongst their neighbors and other people. And therefore, in a way, we have come to realize that the radio is one of the most effective means of disseminating this information compared to all the other channels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Akolo, you are a radio journalist, so yes, that must be good news. I mean, it is the most listened to and consumed media channel. I'd like your comment on that as well, reaching the farmer, reaching the people who need this information to make their decisions.
Great, thank you. Yes, actually, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, radio reaches about 77% of the population. On the issue of how this information can reach the farmers, yes, through the media is the main area that this information can reach the farmers. But I think we need to, as a country, we need to boost the agriculture extension services. And if these agriculture extension service officers are also trained on knowledge on how to interpret meteorological forecasts, then they would be able to advise the farmers better. But even before we look at the agriculture extension officers and the farmers, we should also look at the seed development companies. They too need to now start working with the Kenya Meteorological Department so that they can know what type of seed will be appropriate for that particular season. For example, right now that we are talking about the agriculturally potential areas receiving near to above average rainfall, then if the seed companies were to then provide seed that these farmers can actually maximize production using the appropriate seed and using the appropriate fertilizer, so that we are able to produce more this particular season, so that, because we don't know what will happen the following season. And then also, if we maximize our production in the areas that are expected to receive near to above average rainfall, then we'll also be offsetting some of the expenditure that we would use in the areas that are expected to receive near to below normal rainfall. So essentially, information is good, but the application might be misapplied. And it can be misapplied in the sense that, yes, the farmer knows that the onset in my area is on during this particular week. That's the information that he has. But this farmer may not be able to get the right seed to grow during that particular season. So it will be, we need to work in a concerted effort where the whole spectrum of players are on the same page. Yes, the farmer gets the information, but then the seed development sectors, are they also on the same page so that the farmer doesn't lose? But again, when you look at it now, when you look at the impact now on the economy, and if we are really trying to address the issue of poverty, at some point we'll also get stuck, because this is where the problem will arise. That a farmer who was able to grow at the beginning of the season and knew very well that the season would be good, but in the end something happens. Maybe there is hailstones, like you remember what happened in Nyando, where farmers actually lost their crop. Now, this is where I was thinking we should have a budgetary allocation that can then stimulate, the insurance sector. Incentivize the insurance sector to be able to offer insurance to farmers, although they don't like that because the the smallholder farmers are a bigger risk. But if government can come in to ensure that they are incentivizing these insurance companies, they'll be able then to offer insurance to the smallholder farmers, so that we don't end up in a situation where a farmer loses crop and he had put everything in it, and then they are back to zero and they have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm. I think credit where it's due. Last year, I think the third quarter, the government launched a program with some insurers who specifically focus on agriculture.
Yes.
And the deal was that any farmer who gets the subsidized fertilizer gets insurance in there. So of course, that was the launch. We will see the impact of that, during this year's agricultural production cycle, right? So to you, Dr. Muita, your comment on cushioning farmers more.
Yeah, I guess first and foremost is to ensure that access is improved, because they say information is power. So where we have the challenges in accessing this information, other actors, as Akolo said, is that there should be some investment. And now that we are in a devolved system of governance, I guess within their policies, they can strengthen that by possibly coming up with new actors. For example, at the Kenya Met Department, we would propose to have like what we call information, climate information officers, maybe in every county. And if the resources are allocated, then in every ward. Because I believe when you look at the system of the legislature, you have an MCA for every ward. Assume that was a climate information officer in that ward. Then most likely you'd find that in all the wards in Kenya, they would be able to access this information. Why? Because there is a specific office that is delineated for information dissemination, and also in terms of ensuring that this happens, there is need also of capacity, improving the capacity of the end users, whether they are farmers, those end users in the water sector, in the forest sector, and other livelihood sectors. Because there are people who still do not have the capacity to use the information because they don't know how. So when they hear that, oh, the forecast says that we'll have more rainfall and so on, what they do, probably they would run and buy seeds, tend their farm, prepare, and then they just go on. But you see, when their capacity has been improved, they might know that I need also to know which seeds, seed variety, or which crops would be more favorable for this particular. For example, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has come up with, kind of like a map whereby each crop variety, they have even defined the amount of rainfall that is suitable for that. Maize, you have several, some of you come from farming regions in this country. Some maize variety like I think 514 or 612, they require a lot of rainfall. So it means you cannot maybe plant that in the event that you expect below average rainfall. And therefore, to build the capacity of the farmers and people to know how to actually make decisions. And there is what we call anticipatory action. It's like when you know the impact or what is expected, then you plan your decisions according to what is in place. And therefore you anticipate. You don't start acting when something happens. And I think if that is done, then that would be a good thing. And then finally, I also tend to think that the Kenya Met Department has come up with a meteorological bill which wants to transit the service into a semi-autonomous agency, so that in that bill we are also looking into integrating indigenous knowledge forecasts, because that also plays a major role across the various communities we have in this country. And they will become an integral part of the Weather and Climate Information Service, such that when we are producing the scientifically generated forecast and information, we also see how we also bring in the indigenous knowledge, so that when we have both of them synchronized, then we would benefit more and inform the people. And there is a strong sense of ownership when people feel that what comes from us, and indigenous knowledge would go beyond just looking at the environment. It would also go to what we call local knowledge. Local knowledge is about the experience that somebody has had having lived in that area, and therefore they bring that information and we package it together with the science-driven information. Then we expect that that will be a powerful tool for us to adapt better for the changing climate.
Right. We look forward to covering it when it's already an act.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. Another way of cushioning farmers, of course, is moving away from rain-fed agriculture to irrigation. And one of the government has been very intentional in investing in irrigation infrastructure, but one of the challenges that has always come up is the shrinking acreage per capita. That, we were 10, now we have, 1 acre each, there were 10 acres, and it keeps shrinking. And so I would like to hear your comments in terms of how this can be mitigated or slowed down, so to say, because land division will always happen. But how can this be mitigated, and even to ensure that farmers, despite their size of acreage, have access to irrigation equipment and facilities? Start with you, Judith.
Great. I think when at the start of the program, the affordable housing program, if we recall very well, our president, His Excellency William Ruto, spoke about the need to ensure that we have a way that we allow various homes to have a particular area where they can have their housing, and then they release the arable land to agricultural productivity. And then I think part of the reason why we have the affordable housing is also to ensure that we have people living in particular areas and we release land that is agriculturally potential. And also we remove these, the challenge of land subdivisions. Because there are areas that are very highly agricultural potential areas, but the problem is they've been fragmented. So you can't really support such farmers with infrastructure such as irrigation. But also we have micro irrigation equipment that can actually be utilized by smallholder farmers. The issue is we need a private sector that is proactive, that can actually see, do we need this kind of micro irrigation plants, and how do we ensure that the smallholder farmers are able to access? So if we have this kind of thinking by the private sector, then we can roll it out across the country so that we leave the big infrastructure plants that are being put up by the government to be done by government. But the private sector can now ensure that the smallholder farmers are able to do what? To access. But again, when you look at some of the communities, where people are already using micro irrigation equipment, there are quite a number. It's only that perhaps they've not really been able to access proper information from the agricultural extension officers on how to increase the productivity. Otherwise, it's in place, but we need now to learn from one another so that we are able to have that multiplier effect. And then another thing that we could also look at is whenever government puts in place programs, we should also, as media, be able to amplify that so that the public is able to know that this kind of program is in place, and how can they actually take up that particular program. Yeah, that would be my response to that.
Right. Dr. Muita, I'll get your comments in just a little bit. I am informed that we need to go on location, and the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry is having its AGM and also launching the e-government procurement capacity building program. The KNCCI president, that is Dr. Eric Ruto, is currently speaking there. Let's listen into that.
After our Chamber Vice President Mustafa Ramadan led a delegation of 40 business people to Saudi Arabia in terms of exchanging business information. Kenya has engaged with the Kingdom of Saudi and ranked as the third largest global market for labor, which was operationalized last year, and with over 200,000 Kenyans employed in Saudi Arabia. We appreciate that kind of partnership. As Kenya National Chambers of Commerce, to continue offering training opportunities, we came up with a Chamber Business Academy, and so far we have graduated over 600 SMEs who have done training in digital skills, digital transformation, international partnerships, international partner search, and knowledge transfer in terms of manufacturing. In the last 2 years, Kenya National Chambers of Commerce, to promote international trade, we have opened our office in China, which so far we have managed to take over 125 SMEs for purposes of training, and we have, through new markets, exported over 750 million Kenyan products to new markets in China. We recently also launched our office in Dubai to be able to provide market intelligence and verification of importers in UAE so that we can be able to offer our members international support in terms of trade. We have other programs that we've been doing as Kenya National Chambers of Commerce, especially in terms of market access and also credit access. We have a program called Jinua Program. In the last 2 years, our chief guests, we have trained over 40,000 youth and given advance of non-collateralized loan to over 36,000 companies across this country, and these are the future captains of industry. In conclusion, the government, our development partners and members of the business community, KNCCI, we affirm our commitment of being a trusted partner to government, strong advocate for business, catalyst for growth, trade and enterprise development. We call our members and the business community to participate actively in e-procurement trainings, engage the Chamber on policy challenges and opportunities that we have through our Kenya National Chambers of Commerce and Industry, business intelligence and MOUs, and leverage KNCCI networks locally and internationally. Thank you very much, and I would like to invite our chief guest this morning. I would like to start with our neighbor from Uganda, Honorable Her Excellency Juliet Kagudu, the first Secretary for Commercial Attaché, and representing Ambassador Eunice Gigenyi, Her Excellency the Ambassador for Uganda. Thank you very much.
That is Dr. Eric Ruto there, the president of KNCCI, speaking at the AGM, Annual General Meeting of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as the launch of its e-government capacity building. And we shall be getting back to that in a little bit, but we'll get back now to studio and continue our conversation on matters impact of weather changes, especially the economic impact on farmers, on livelihoods. And having this conversation with me is Dr. Richard Muita. He's the Deputy Director in charge of Climate Services, Kenya Meteorological Department, as well as my colleague who is a climate journalist. She is Judith Akolo. And before we took that particular link, Akolo, you were telling us about the cushioning farmers and ensuring that irrigation services are reaching them. So, Dr. Muita, I'd like to hear your comment on that as well.
Yeah, I guess irrigation is a good thing, especially when it's well planned. However, in my own view, I guess we need to start from the basics. Where does the water come from? While we all know that the water comes from rainfall, it's not the water that comes from the rainfall that sustains any socio-economic activities. I've been privileged to undertake some research in the rising water levels of the Rift Valley lakes in Kenya. And since it's in the media, or it's in the public domain, you saw that there were some people who were misplaced, some land was destroyed and property mushroomed by water. And part of that was people's farms, where people were farming. Whether they were farming there as the owners of that land or not, the issue is that that water took some space. And from the research that we have undertaken, we find that the most optimal or the most important way to sustain that would be to improve the catchment areas. Because one of the causes that has brought maybe such a problem is that when there are not enough trees, I'm talking about deforestation, there is nothing to hold that water in the catchment areas. Because once you have the water in the catchment areas, then the water is released slowly into the rivers, perhaps even into the dams, and therefore can sustain these agricultural and other socio-economic activities, including even the ordinary water supply that we look to. So in my view, I think there needs to be what we call a deliberate action to actually put our catchments in the right shape. And then secondly, as I said, building the capacity of the farmers to know how they can even undertake irrigation agriculture. Because irrigation agriculture is quite intensive. You know, it's not, actually it is a science that you really need to know how you can use water and utilize it properly. For example, I did my doctorate in Australia, which is largely a desert. However, they use a lot of what we call precision agriculture, where some little water like what we have here can be used to, give a yield which is substantial. And therefore, you do not need so much water for you to really come up with good production. But that needs incentives. The government should come in, and as I earlier said, in terms of the existing policies, even right now when you look, I guess there is an agriculture extension program kind of regulation and law. And if that can be implemented, and therefore they take the farmers and say, we are deliberately going to undertake some irrigation programs in this area, and perhaps the government, because you talked about the issue of the shrinking size of land, the government comes up with a deliberate plan, for instance, of saying that in a particular area, we are going to give this group of farmers or investors to come and do irrigation, so that it should be a deliberate attempt. Otherwise, when it's left as is right now, it will be very difficult for, say, subsistence or smallholder farmers to initiate certain things on their own. It will be almost impossible because probably they are struggling with other issues. So I think this should be a deliberate thing that if we want to boost the food security situation and we want to go to the agricultural sector, let us also put diversification. For example, in agriculture, you see that there are many things that you can undertake. For example, how much incentives have been put into apiculture, where we have beekeeping. Like in those semi-arid areas, people still use these old traditional methods of harvesting or keeping bees, where you cut this log of tree and then you do not have. From what I have learned, even through the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture, bees is like having a farm, a 20-acre farm. If you put them and you are guided well, you can even be richer than a maize farmer. So I think some of these things, if they are trickled down to these smallholder farmers, I'm sure they can do very well. How about poultry? If they can be really encouraged, this is the way you can do it. How about so many other things within the agriculture sector? I think when we give the information in terms of the weather and climate information, it's those other experts in those areas to take up the regulations and the policies, package them, have an engagement with the farmers, have an engagement with the water sector, the energy sector, and then see how we can move from where we are maybe to another level. Yeah.
I like the use of the word deliberate, you know.
It should be deliberate.
It must be deliberate. And of course, there's a time when the president was talking about we do not need rain, we need water. And, you know, there was uproar around it, but people, I think, did not understand what he meant from a scientific perspective. And so even as the government is racing to plant trees, I know that there's a tree, the eucalyptus tree, that takes up a lot of water from the underground storage areas. So there's also the need for information. As you said, information trickle down is very important. But before we close the conversation now, I would like to hear from you what you foresee happening, maybe in the next, as you said, short term, medium term. What do you want to see happening?
Well, in the short term, maybe let's strengthen the existing infrastructure, because, for example, we expect some flash floods in some areas, even some flooding in some areas. So in the short term, when it comes to disaster management, we need to fix the existing infrastructure, ensure that it is in a good condition to actually cushion any loss of life or damage to property. Then for those sectors like the agriculture, the crop farming and so on, that require immediate intervention, then the relevant agencies should work with those sectors, ensure that they give them the right information and tell them this is how you utilize this to maximize it. Then in the medium term, we could look at situations where, like the government plans of building up to 15 billion trees by 2030. What do we do during the rain season? You find that sometimes we plant trees during the dry season. Surely, one does not need to have gone to school. So some of those things are things we can do in the medium term, where we say that come next season, we are going to plant maybe 5 million trees, ensure we plant them at the right time when there is water. Because planting is not enough. Growing the trees to sustain them would be important. Then you can trickle that idea across all the other sectors. In the long term, let us look at mitigation plans within our policies, whereby we can say maybe in the next 5-10 years, where do we want our farmers to be? Where do we want our infrastructure that supports those livelihood streams to be? Where do we want our water situation to be? Because remember, Kenya is a water scarce country. We may argue and say we have a lot of water that comes, but what do we do with the water? Israel, as we speak, is a desert. They grow food. I'll tell you, you wouldn't believe it, that these people, they have a bunker where they store food that can last them for the next 100 years, in case there is no water and rain in the world. So ask, can we exist in 3 months or 4?
No, absolutely
So I
not.
guess you have the answer to what do we do for the short, medium, and long term.
Right.
We can do it better.
We can do it better. Judith, he has mentioned a lot, and I know World Radio Day is coming up sometime next week. I'd like to hear from you the role of journalists in terms of amplifying these stories and even contributing to policy and regulatory changes that need to happen. Go ahead.
Thank you for that question. Just before I answer your question, I want to support what Dr. Mita has just said. We need to really ensure that we support government policy in planting the 15 billion trees, because our catchment areas are poorly degraded. And as Dr. Mita said, that is why we are having the inflows into our lakes that are too fast during the rain season, such that we have then people getting displaced because of the well-up of the water. And then another thing that perhaps he didn't mention is that this particular forecast is good because the areas where we get our hydroelectricity power, they are going to receive near to above average rainfall. So I'm sure with the electricity we are well catered for, because then they'll have to generate more from the hydros, because look at all that catchment, all those catchment areas, there's enough water that is going into the hydros. And now going back to the World Radio Day, I need to just encourage us that we have access to the information. Our ears are always on the ground. We speak to the policy planners. Let us ensure that this information reaches the public so that they're able to make the decisions that we've just talked about. If we have information on the forecast, let us package it in a way that that farmer is able to make the right decision over what he needs to do with his farm. Let us also be able to inform the public so that they are safe. You know, there are times when the storm comes, and if we don't inform the public in good time, then their safety is at risk. We are the eyes and the ears of the public. So let us do our best, and considering that 77% of our population has access to radio, then we are the right medium through which this information can reach the public. And then to the journalists, my fellow journalists, my call would be this: let us not be content with the training that we got from journalism school. Let us expand our knowledge base so that we are able then to deliver information that is knowledgeable to the public, that can help in decision making. That will be my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will take that as your closing remark.
Yes.
Dr. Muita, you have 1 minute to give me your closing remarks.
Well, just to encourage Kenyans, all sectors, to actually utilize the information we have provided for this season to their advantage. For those mamas and babas back in the rural areas, they don't understand maybe English or so, we have their children who go to school. Let them try to educate their parents and those who do not understand. Then I encourage the collaboration between the media and all these other stakeholders, so that when we come together, we can be able to encourage our country to utilize the information in the right way. Even where there is excess, let's utilize it such that we can bridge the gap where we do not expect this excess. And therefore, we'll also continue providing the short-term, continuous 24-hour forecasts, weekly forecasts, monthly forecasts, because some drivers cannot capture some of the things that happen in a short time. So they should continue following us as a department so that we can provide them the information. We should not say we got the seasonal forecast and we rest, because if there is a storm expected next week, what will you do? Maybe your livestock can come and be swept, but if you have that information, you can be able to take the right, measures to avoid that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and thank you both of you for the work that you're doing. Asante sana. I have been speaking with Dr. Richard Muita, Deputy Director in charge of Climate Services at the Kenya Meteorological Department, as well as Judith Akolo, who is a climate journalist here at KBC. We have been talking about the economic impact of weather changes, of course, the impact of climate change, and how to ensure that the farmers and people who need the information to make good decisions and choices on their farms get the information when they need it. And of course, as Dr. Muita says, there is, they'll continue giving us those short-term forecasts as well, to ensure that Kenyans are well informed and take the necessary action. That is the first conversation here on BizCheck.